This is a Sports Catastrophe production.
Hey there, Heather Ho there. It's Jeff Cutter Diamond welcoming you to another Sports Catastrophe on this date. And on this day, April the 4th, 2011, an improbable run to winning the NCAA basketball tourney was finished as the University of Connecticut defeated Butler to win their third title in history and do quite well and all that. So the 2011 tournament was huge. This was actually the first year that they introduced the first four round, meaning that the tournament would be expanded from 65 teams to 68. So there would be four games. The winners of those four games would get into the tournament. But it wasn't like all four games were for the 16 seed. One game was for the 11 seed in a region, one was for a 12 seed, and two were for a 16 seed. So they would add more teams and all that. The the key thing was for the first time in 5 years, no number one seeds made it to the Final Four. The highest was Connecticut at number 3. And for the third time ever, an 11 seed went to the Final Four. And this was actually the first Final Four since the seeding process was open that no 1 or 2 seeds made it. Anyway, Connecticut would win the championship, but upsets would rule the 2011 tournament. As the East had number 11 seed Marquette reach the Sweet 16. The Southwest saw 4 double-digit seeds win their first round match. And Gonzaga at 11 seed in the Southeast won their first round match. The Big East put up 11 teams out of 16 to make the tournament. So anyway, because they had more than 8 teams, there was possible for Big East matchups to occur in the third round. They tried their best not to have the same conference face each other for a while. Anyway, Northern Colorado would be the only team that would make their NCAA tournament debut. So as I said, there were 4 teams that were having to go through these matchups. The 4 overall lowest ranked teams and the 4 lowest ranked at-large teams. In the East, the 16th seed was decided by a match between Texas San Antonio and Alabama State, which San Antonio won 70-61. The East also had the 12th seed decided a match between Clemson and UAB, with Clemson winning the match. So San Antonio's reward was to face Ohio State, the 1 seed, and Clemson's reward was to face the 5 seed West Virginia Mountaineers. In the Southeast, the number 16 seed was UNC Asheville, who beat Arkansas Little Rock by a score of 81-77 in overtime. And the Southwest number 11 seed was Virginia Commonwealth, who beat USC 59-46 to move up. So the East Regional, the number 1 seed Ohio State Buckeyes lost a narrow one to Kentucky 62-60 in the Sweet 16. Kentucky, after beating Princeton and West Virginia, and then Ohio State, will take on North Carolina, the 2 seed, and beat them 76-69. As Brandon Knight put up the points to help Kentucky win the regional final over a North Carolina squad that had Tyler Seller. In the West Regional, the 1 seed Duke Blue Devils went to the Sweet 16 and lost to the 5 seed Arizona Wildcats 93-77. Arizona beat Memphis and Texas to get there, and then Arizona would face the 3 seed Connecticut Huskies. Connecticut took care of Bucknell, Cincy, and San Diego State to get this far to the West Regional Final and narrowly beat Arizona 65-63. Kemba Walker put up 20 points in the win. So that was huge for Kemba. In the Southwest Regional, the 1 seed Kansas Jayhawks got to the Elite Eight, unlike their two other number 1 seeds. Kansas had taken care of Boston University, Illinois, and Richmond to get this far. However, they would have to deal with the 11 seed Virginia Commonwealth Rams. Remember how VCU got in the tournament? Yeah, they got in the tournament with that play-in game. They would take on Georgetown, beat them, and then beat Purdue 94-76 before narrowly beating Florida State in overtime to get this far. Everyone thought Kansas was going to win this thing, especially with Marcus Morris putting up some key numbers. But somehow, in some way, led by 26 points of Jamie Skeen, the VCU Rams, 11 seed, upset the 1 seed Kansas Jayhawks 71-61 to move on to the Final Four. Another shock would happen in the Southeast Regional. Pitt was the 1 seed. They beat UNC Asheville, but then lost to Butler, the defending runners-up in the NCAA, as they lost the final to Duke in a close one. Butler narrowly beat Pittsburgh by 1, and then Butler beat Old Dominion narrowly, then they beat Pitt narrowly. They faced Wisconsin and beat Wisconsin by 7, and would face the 2 seed Florida Gators, who had taken care of Santa Barbara, UCLA, and BYU. It was a close one. It went to overtime, and the Butler Bulldogs shocked everyone by winning over the Gators, led by 27 points of Shelvin Mack, outscoring Vernon Macklin. So we got to the Final Four. Kentucky would face Connecticut, and VCU would take on Butler. So you had a stoic, old-school team to face one of the lower-seeded teams. It was funny how 3 versus 4 and then 8 versus 11. UConn was up by 10 at the half on Kentucky, but somehow, in some way, Kentucky fought back. Fortunately, though, Connecticut narrowly pulled it off 56-55 and would move on to the final. They would face Butler, who beat VCU, outscoring them in both halves. So Mac did the job. So Butler took care of VCU and would face UConn for the title. Yeah, it was the first time in tournament history that there were no 1 or 2 seeds in the Final Four. It wouldn't happen again until 2023. But in 2024, I can tell you that it has happened, as UConn is in the Final Four. That's the 1 seed. VCU was number 11 seed and was the third 11 seed to get to the Final Four. So anyway, the national championship game happened. So we go to that and all that. But the story of UConn in winning the 2011 championship was not just, they beat Butler. The simple fact was how they got here. UConn was actually ranked number 9 in the 2011 Big East men's basketball tournament, meaning that they would have had to face, they would have to run the gamut. Yeah, they would have to run the gamut. So the top 8 teams in the Big East got byes, at least to the second round. The top 4 teams got double byes, meaning they were in the quarterfinals. So UConn just missing out on things. They were 9th in the conference in the regular season at 9-9. So they had to run the gamut, as I said. They faced DePaul, who were the worst team in the Big East, and crushed them 97-71. They would then face Georgetown, their bitter rivals, and beat them 79-62 in round 2. The quarterfinals, they would take on the higher seed, number 3 in the NCAA, but the 1 seed in the Big East tournament, Pitt, and nearly beat them 76-74. They would face Syracuse in the semifinals, beating them in overtime, and then would face number 14 Louisville in the nation, number 3 in the Big East. But somehow Kemba Walker and crew won 69-66. That meant that UConn was in the tournament no matter what because they were the Big East playoff champions. So it was a hot start and all that. That win for the Big East championship got them to the 3 seed in the West. Butler lost the final to Duke, like I said the previous year, and somehow got to the final. So Butler had Shelvin Mack, Sean Van Sant, Chase Stegall, Matt Howard, and Andrew Smith be the starting lineup. UConn countered with Kemba Walker, Jeremy Lamb, Roscoe Smith, Tyler Olander, and Alex Aranki. So anyway, this was a huge one and all that. So it was a tight contest. However, the first half was the big problem because a combined 41 points were scored in the first half, with Butler winning the first half 22-19. It was like unbelievable. Both teams had terrible shooting and all that. It was just like unbelievable what could happen and all that. So the second half happened, and UConn outflanked Butler 34-19 in the second half, winning the game 53-41. Usually, championship games have like a team at least score 60 plus, but UConn only scored 53 in the game. Butler would have the unfortunate part of their 41 points being the worst in a championship game since 1949, way back in the day, like 6 decades. The second half was just terrible for Butler. They were at 6 for 37, or practically 1 out of 6 shots. Butler would have 18.8% shooting for the entire game. It didn't help matters that UConn blocked 10 shots, which led to Butler not doing well shooting. Sheldon Mack put up 13 points to lead Butler, whereas Jeremy Lamb actually scored 12 points in the second half by himself. So he almost outscored Mack by himself. It was a huge win. 11 straight games. So UConn had to go through the 5-game Big East tournament. Like, they had to go through 5 rounds of the Big East tournament. And then they went through the gamut of the NCAA tournament, having to go through the regional, win the Final Four against Kentucky, and then take down Butler. So they had to go through 11 games in one of the most improbable runs in NCAA history. And UConn, of course, is the defending champion nowadays. But anyway, it's still huge how UConn did it and how that run helped things out. Anyway, I'm Jeff Diamond. I do.